Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to give it just 1 minute for folks to log on, and then we'll dive in. Couple of notes up front. One is just a really, really big thank you to the teams that pulled this together. From the Croatan side, we were thrilled to partner with Christi and David and Jamie and Athena. On the GIIN side, really proud to have worked with Kellen, Grace, Sophia, and Leticia, and also a special thank you to the AVPN team for their help in socializing and testing this in the Asian markets. We're going to spend a couple of minutes doing very quick context setting, but we'll spend the bulk of the time on this conversation on the theme itself. So what is in it? What are the different areas that we looked at and we covered? How can it be used? And then we'll actually spend some time with two investors, talking with them about how they're thinking of using the work itself. Couple quick housekeeping notes. You are welcome and encouraged to send us questions as we go along. There is a questions box, I believe, on the toolbar that you'll see. You can send those directly to us, and we'll cover them as we have time. And beyond that, we look forward to sharing with you what we've been working on these past couple of months. So my name is Lissa, and I work with the Global Impact Investing Network. The Global Impact Investing Network is the global champion of impact investing, and our focus is really increasing both the scale and the effectiveness of impact investing around the world. I'll pass it over here to Christi, who can speak to the Croatan Institute.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Christi Electris. Lissa, I'm not seeing the slides advance.
That is interesting. 1 second.
I'm happy to get started as you find our slide. So my name is Christi Electris. I'm a co-founder and fellow at Croatan Institute. Croatan Institute is an independent nonprofit research institute whose mission is to harness the power of investment for social good and ecological resilience. The Institute's work in this area has gone back quite a while, but we have an organic agriculture revitalization strategy that's re-envisioning organic food and agriculture as an inclusive economic development strategy for revitalizing rural places. And through that work, we've published a report, which I'll talk about in a little bit, called Soil Wealth, Investing in Regenerative Agriculture Across Asset Classes. And last year, we began work on a USDA Conservation Innovation Grant to develop a concept of regenerative organic agricultural districts, or roads, to help agricultural producers and landowners finance soil wealth using land-secured financing mechanisms and other place-based investing approaches. So for more information about our work as an institute, which goes well beyond sustainable agriculture, you can visit our website at crotoninstitute.org. So today, my colleague Jaime Silverstein and I will be presenting, and the rest of our team that's been working closely on this project join us as well today, David LeZaks and Athena Owirodu. I also want to acknowledge Susan Pakin, a former associate at Croatan, who contributed greatly to the work when we were just getting started on this project, as well as my other colleagues who have participated in the process. Next slide. I'm still not seeing it advance. If you could pass to the next slide. Today, we're also going to be joined, we're pleased to be joined by two of the investor stakeholders that Lissa mentioned, that were two among the 200+ stakeholders that joined the process. And it's, you're not seeing them yet, I don't think, on the screen, but it's Meredith Storton from RSF Social Finance, and Evi Steyer from Astanor Ventures. So I will pass it back to Lissa.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about these slides. My computer seems to be too old for them at the moment. We will work on it though. And give me just a minute. Kellen, would you be able to pull up the slides on your computer while we figure this out? In the meantime, I'll keep us moving. Although organizing team, if you can see, please do let me know. Okay, so we'll talk very briefly about the background here. No, still no, huh? Okay, well, background verbally then. So IRIS is the generally accepted system for measuring, managing, and optimizing impact. It was built in conversation with over 1,600 different individuals over time. When you see these slides later on, you'll see that there really have been a pretty incredible diversity of folks who have worked on this, and that's everybody from really big institutional asset owners to asset managers of all different types, companies, various initiatives, and experts, such as those who are on the line. Give me just a second. Kellen, I am making you a presenter. Okay. And so a number of folks were also involved in this process. So we were really, really lucky to work with over 200 stakeholders in the development of this particular effort. IRIS was built in alignment with over 50 different standards and frameworks. A number of them include things like PRI, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, CSAF's efforts, GRI, 2X Challenge, Sustainable Development Goals, and the Impact Management Project, among many, many others. And there are a number of themes already available in IRIS Plus. So currently available are financial inclusion, energy access, education, quality healthcare, smallholder agriculture, sustainable forestry, affordable housing, gender lens, and sustainable water management. Kellen, so if you can skip forward just a couple of slides, I'm on the ongoing development of themes slide. So in development now are a number, which you'll see on your screen now. Thank you, Kellen. Sustainable agriculture is the one that we are launching today in the Navigating Impact project. A number of others will be kicking off in the next couple of weeks and months, and a number of further themes will be developed over time. So next slide. So within IRIS Plus are a number of key features. Each of these strategic goals anchors around a core metric sets, which is really designed to help investors and other folks within this space narrow in on the metrics that are most recommended by folks already active and deeply thoughtful within this space. And Croatan will share that work that they've developed for the sustainable agriculture theme in this presentation. Within the system is also a deep evidence base connecting different delivery models and approaches to key outcomes. And then finally, practical guidance that can help investors put those pieces, those approaches, and those metrics into action. On to the next slide. So just to give a quick picture of how we've developed this theme to date, as you can see here, there are a couple of key phases to the development of this theme. And Kellen, if you click once, it'll show you where we are today. We've spent the last 6-ish months working through a series of processes to really deeply look at the work that's already out there and the evidence that underpins this space. To speak with a number of you about how you think about this space, how you work within it, what your goals and your challenges are, and then based on that and going through a number of drafting and consulting phases to gather feedback from you. And so what we're launching today is the product of all of those different conversations and hours of research. From here, we will move into a broader standardization and public comment period, which we invite all of you to be a part of. And then ultimately, it'll be launched on IRIS Plus as part of the generally accepted system for measuring and managing impact. So on to the next slide. Okay, and over to Christi.
Thank you so much, Lissa, and thanks for everyone's patience. And I appreciate Kellen's help in getting the slides back up. We really have enjoyed working with this team, with the GIIN, and with, as I mentioned, over 200 stakeholders giving us really valuable input about this specific theme. It's a big one. So today I'll start by giving you a brief overview of our work at Croatan Institute in Sustainable and Regenerative Agriculture Investing. And then my colleague, Jaime Silverstein, will dive deeper into the 5 strategic goals that we focused on for this first development of sustainable agriculture for the Navigating Impact project. Now, there are probably more than enough other goals worthy goals that could have been included, but we did focus in on these that rose to the top among our group of stakeholders. We'll then be joined, after Jaime dives into the goals and the metrics that we've developed, we'll be joined by 2 sustainable agriculture investors, as I mentioned, Meredith Storton from RSF and Evi Steyer from Astanor Ventures, so who will tell us how their firms approach impact measurement. As we go along, actually, if you have any questions, you can put them in the questions box. If we have time at the end, we'll be happy to answer them. So if something pops in your mind, feel free to go ahead and put it in. So next slide, please. Croatan Institute, as an organization and as with the people we've been working closely with, have been working in sustainable food and agriculture, as well as other impact issues in the US and across the world, focused on creating positive impact throughout the capital system. In 2017, we worked on a report on impact investing across asset classes, taking our framework of total portfolio activation. And so this latest paper from 2019 that we released, called Soil Wealth, really applied this framework of total portfolio activation, thinking about how do we create soil wealth, or what we used to describe as the constellation of benefits associated with both building soil health and community wealth through sustainable regenerative agriculture. And how do you build that, look across the financial value chain, from the asset owners and institutional investors to the different asset classes of how that money can be invested into the different parts of the agricultural value chain. We also paid particular notice to catalytic capital, the role of catalytic capital that can include the financial and non-financial capitals that support this part of the system. Through this soil wealth report, which was actually part of a 2-year examination of the space and was part of another USDA conservation innovation grant, we were able to provide one of the most comprehensive landscape analyses of the state of regenerative agriculture investing in the United States. And our work in this space is really about connecting these different value chains, agriculture and capital value chains. So as we, actually, if we can move to the next slide, I think. Oh, can you move back one? There we go, thank you. So this figure, oh, you were fine, just ahead. Next slide, please. There's a little animation there, I don't want to cover it up too soon. Oh, it goes right away. Well, this underneath there, this figure is borrowed from a report from 2019 called Growing Better, 10 Critical Transitions to Transform Food and Land Use. So we know that the current way that dominant forms of agriculture are done across the world come at really large hidden costs globally. Right now, this study found that it's about $12 trillion of costs compared to just the $10 trillion of market value. These costs are born from very different places, economic, environmental, and health costs. So as a community of stakeholders that are using capital as a tool to help transition agriculture and other systems, we're trying to find a balance of how we can best use capital to reduce those public costs and increase the benefits of public and private. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So this diagram is borrowed from our soil wealth report, and as we know from that, the benefits that are delivered from a more sustainable regenerative agriculture system accrue to the places where most of those negative costs lie. These map really well to some of the sets of costs and benefits that we now see in the environmental system, system across health, environment, and the economy. So it's bringing forward these beneficial types of agriculture, which have benefits for growing, for eating, and for those who could be impacted by environmental quality and environmental conservation questions. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. There are many frameworks that have been developed in this space. Some have specific environmental focus, like the planetary boundaries that Stockholm Resilience Center put out a few years back, that defines a safe ecological operating space for humanity. And you're all probably familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that define global social equity and environmental goals. As also, we do look a lot at the World Health Organization's social determinants of health, which evaluate the conditions in the places where people live, learn, work, and play, and that can affect a whole range of health and quality of life risks and outcomes. So sustainable agriculture, food and agriculture really touch on all these, sorry, I was still on the previous, thank you. They touch on all of these frameworks, and as many others, of course, but there's really a high level of complexity in this conversation on how, in this field, and how it interacts and how they relate to investment and the future of our planet. So the 5 goals that we developed were developed in relationships to these frameworks, and indeed, each of our goals will be explicitly linked back to the most salient SDGs, as all of the IRIS Plus strategic goals are. So now I'll turn to my colleague, Jaime Silverstein, who will discuss the 5 goals that our team developed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christi. So as Christi and Lissa had mentioned, we've worked with many stakeholders and in collaboration with the GIIN to identify 5 strategic goals for the sustainable agriculture theme. And next slide, if it hasn't already been advanced. So these 5 goals that we've identified include improving ecosystem health, improving human health, improving climate resilience, increasing the resiliency of food systems, and improving social equity and justice. So I will take you through a little bit more detail of each of these 5 goals, and then we'll discuss some of the metrics associated with these goals. Next slide, please. So our first goal is improving ecosystem health. So ecosystem health is important for agricultural production and can help farming systems become more productive and resilient by increasing species and soil biodiversity. Healthy and functioning ecosystems can help pollinate crops, they can help manage pests and disease, they can filter water, and offer additional services that are critical for land-based agriculture. Investments aligned with this strategic goal can support ecosystem health by financing agricultural technologies that support climate resilient practices, such as improved soil health, efficient water use, and increased water holding capacity. They can also create new investment approaches that include appropriate technical assistance and training to encourage and support sustainable and regenerative farming practices, such as sustainable grazing management plans, decreased tillage, and regionally appropriate cropping plans. Investments can purchase or assist in purchasing farmland or farming operations whose emphasis is on improving biodiversity and ecosystem health. They can advance the development of new crop and livestock breeds that create lower negative impacts on local ecosystems. And they can promote the circular economy by looking at farm to fork and back to farm processes that reduce waste and encourage continual recycling of resources. So one example of an investment that improves ecosystem health that we looked at is RSF Social Finance's investment in Gayaki, a yerba mate-based beverage company that works with smallholder organic farmers in South America. Gayaki exclusively sources shade-grown yerba mate at a premium which has encouraged farmers to reforest their land with native hardwoods to resemble the plant's more natural growing environment. As of 2019, Kayaki stewards 174,000 acres of Atlantic rainforests, provides $140 million in ecosystem services. They monitor more than 400 species of flora and fauna in cultivated forests. They've conserved 925 billion liters of water in the soil on 383,000 acres of agroforestry, and they've contributed to the economic sovereignty of 1,190 indigenous and smallholder family members producing yerba mate. We will hear a lot more about how RSF applies this goal and this larger theme in a little bit from Meredith. Next slide, please. So our next goal is improving human health through sustainable agriculture. Agriculture has a direct impact on not only the type of food and the nutritional value of food produced, but also can affect human health through the growing practices implemented on the ground. Practices that support healthy soil with a flourishing microbiome helps to impart nutrition to food. While healthy soils stand at the core of agriculture, soil is embedded in a complex system of production in which diet, seed, animal genetics are all inputs, as well as inputs such as pesticides and antibiotics are all factors into and that impact human health. Investments in this goal can, for example, purchase or support the purchase of farmland or farming operations that emphasize improving plant, animal, and human health. They can bring products to market that clearly articulate their connections to improving human health. They can develop new technologies to measure and monitor food quality. They can advance the development of new crop and livestock breeds with improved nutritional qualities. And they can create new insurance mechanisms that internalize the true cost of agriculture and human health. Kumako is a Zambia-based social enterprise that supports nearly 200,000 small-scale farmers. Over almost 20 years, Kumako's programs and market-building strategies have led to a more biodiverse landscape and a population with increased food security. Anchored in the production and sales of nutrient-dense food, Kumako has pioneered a bio-fortified breakfast cereal made with local varieties, which they have provided to schools across Zambia to increase nutritional security. Kumako also conducts ongoing research into increasing the nutrient density of the food they produce. Next slide, please. So our third goal is improving climate resilience through agriculture. Climate change is the most pressing environmental issue facing humanity and the planet. Agriculture is a key source of carbon emissions, with an estimated 25% of total global greenhouse gas emissions caused directly by changes in land use and crop and animal production. At the same time, farmers and their land also suffer from the consequences of climate change. Rising temperatures are already affecting planting and harvest dates around the world and are driving new and intensified pressures from pest and disease, water shortages, droughts, and more frequent and more intense extreme weather events. Building climate resilience is critical to the future of farmers, land, water, and food resources around the world. In the context of sustainable agriculture, resilience in the capacity of agriculture, farming communities, households, and individuals to maintain or enhance system-wide productivity by preventing, mitigating, or coping with risks, adapting to change, and recovering from shocks. Investments in climate resilient agriculture can build long-term stability for farmers and agricultural systems in the face of intensified weather events and changing climate patterns. Investments that support climate resilience can include purchasing or assisting in purchasing farmland or farming operations that use diversified cropping systems to conserve and enrich soils, and operations that use pasture-based livestock systems. They can advance the development of new crop and livestock breeds that are weather and disease resistant, require fewer inputs, and have higher yield stability. And they can also offer risk management strategies to help farmers prepare for and adapt to climate change related events and increase farmer profitability. So one example we looked at for this goal is agriculture capital. Agriculture capital prioritizes climate resiliency in their farmland investments. They invest in regenerative farmland and food processing assets in Washington, Oregon, California, and Australia. And they cover more than 20,000 acres of table grapes, blueberries, hazelnuts, and citrus. They track nearly 150 performance metrics, including worker safety metrics, soil health metrics, and emissions of carbon and particulates. In addition, they are developing systems to track carbon impacts to help make real-time farming decisions. Since launching their U.S. properties have sequestered a total of 13,288 tons of CO2 equivalents through their sustainable in-field practices. Next slide, please. So our fourth goal is increasing the resiliency of food systems. Resilient food systems can withstand short and long-term shocks and stressors, such as natural disasters and extreme weather events. They are described as diverse, integrated, self-regulating, adaptive, inclusive, and equitable. Investments that aim to improve the resilience of food systems can finance food production, infrastructure, and businesses along the value chain, including processing facilities and transport innovations that facilitate the movement to regional markets to connect to consumer outlets. They can purchase or assist in purchasing farmland and farming operations that have an emphasis on sustainable practices, regional markets, social equity, and justice. They can create new investment mechanisms, including appropriate technical assistance to fund sustainable farms and food businesses that improve farm viability. And they can also finance Indigenous-led companies that can increase acceptance of Indigenous foodways as vital components of global production and food sovereignty. The Hivos Triodos Fund has invested in EcoZen Solutions, which is a provider in India of a technology-enabled products that strengthen the sustainable agricultural value chain of perishable foods. EcoZen products are used on 20,000 farms and touch the lives of more than 65,000 people. Farmers using their cold rooms have seen significant increases in profits, up to 40%, as cold storage enables farmers to send their perishable products to better further markets or allows them to wait for more favorable market conditions. Next slide, please. So our last goal that we've identified for this theme is improving social equity and justice through sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agricultural systems will require improved equity, justice, well-being, and dignity for all farm workers, tenant farmers, and farm owners, for workers and business owners in the food and agricultural supply value chains, and for rural and urban communities. Across the developed markets, agricultural landowners have benefited by exploiting farm workers, keeping minority and previously excluded groups from accessing land and agricultural financing, excluding low-income and minority communities from healthy food access, and polluting the water and air in rural communities. As these inequities are spread systematically throughout the food system, solutions must be oriented toward a new economy of and for environmental justice, labor rights, immigration rights, food justice, climate justice, and human rights. To support social equity and justice in agriculture, investments can increase the viability of farm enterprises owned and controlled by minority and previously excluded populations, including women and Indigenous people, and racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual minority groups. They can increase land access for minorities and previously excluded farmers. They can increase sustainable agricultural products purchased from enterprises owned and controlled by minority and previously excluded groups. They can improve healthy access for low-income individuals, Indigenous people, and previously excluded racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual minority communities. They can dismantle racist, gendered, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic institutions, policies, and practices that disadvantage Indigenous, racial, gender, and sexual minority farmers and communities at both the organizational level and through increased investments in these groups. And they can also realize fair and living wages for farm workers and improve workplace safety and workplace conditions. So one example we looked at here for this goal is California Harvesters. They are an employee benefit company that contracts agricultural labor to California growers in the Central Valley. They have raised $1.8 million from a variety of funding partners, including the Working World Renewable Resources Group and Heron Foundation. Since their launch in 2018, they have recruited 1,200 workers, increased productivity by 52%, and maintained a 45% retention rate. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, CHI provided personal protective equipment and safety training for all employees. And as a result, fewer than 1% of CHI employees tested positive for COVID, compared to the 10% of field workers at other labor contractors. CHI also provides all of its employees with comprehensive paid training, fostering a culture of competence and confidence while developing an internal ladder and growth opportunities for CHI employees. Next slide, please. So here we have a selection of some of the core metrics we've identified across these 5 goals. These goals are, these metrics investors can use to help measure impact in the scheme. So some of these metrics are very specific to some of these goals, whereas a lot of them actually cover multiple goals that we've identified. Next slide, please. So to look sort of goal by goal, for ecosystem health, we've identified soil conservation practices, which is actually a new metric being proposed to the IRIS Plus database. We've identified pesticide use, biodiversity assessment, ecosystem services provided, and soil health practices, which is another new metric that we are proposing. Next slide. For human health, we've identified pesticide use, soil health practices, health resilience and improvement strategy, and crop and livestock diversity. Next slide. For the climate resilience goal, you can see there are many overlapping metrics, including soil conservation practices, pesticide use, crop and livestock diversity, ecosystem services provided. And we've also identified the climate resilience strategy metrics specifically for this goal. Next slide, please. Next will be I'll discuss the resiliency of food system metrics. Great, so these metrics include community served, social and environmental targets, crop and livestock diversity, jobs in directly supported enterprises, and percent smallholder sourcing payments, as well as the number of smallholder clients. And then lastly, next slide, looking at the social equity and justice goal. We've identified metrics including the percent of minority or previously excluded ownership. We've looked at wage equity, non-financial support offered, diverse representation policy, and anti-discrimination policies. So I will now turn it over to Meredith Storton of RSF Social Finance and Evi Steyer from Astanor Ventures to talk about how they integrate this theme into their work. So over to Meredith.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we could go to the next slide. So RSF Social Finance, we're a nonprofit whose mission is to circulate capital to social enterprises for a more just and regenerative world. We do this by providing integrated capital, mostly debt financing, to serve the unmet needs of social enterprises. And you can advance the next slide. Thanks. We define social enterprises as organizations who are seeking to solve a social or environmental challenge through their business model. And we work across 3 main focus areas: sustainable food and agriculture, which is the portfolio that I work on, arts and education, and climate and the environment. Sustainable agriculture makes up about 40 million of our $108 million loan portfolio. So it's one of our biggest focus areas. Given the breadth of the focus areas that we work across, we use a qualitative impact assessment tool that looks into a company's different features within a company, like their impact model, their supply chain and resource management, their commitments to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, their organizational culture and structure. So all these different types of pieces. And I think the GIIN framework will be really helpful in informing how we assess the impact model specifically of the companies that we fund within food and agriculture, which will allow us to be just more specific about the impact that they're having in the space. You can advance to the next slide and then the next slide. I didn't need all of these, but the next slide just shows the functions that RSF has in addition to our loan portfolio. So you'll see here a snapshot of some of the borrowers that we work with across our focus areas. In food and ag specifically, our value statement is to cultivate food systems that regenerate health, communities, and the environment. Farmers and soil are at the heart of our work, and we believe that quality of access to food, to farmland, to dignified livelihoods are key to creating a regenerative food system. And how that plays out in the types of companies that we support is that we fund across the supply chain from the farm gate to the retail store shelf, and we support food system infrastructure organizations like food hubs or produce distributors, farmer incubator programs, all the way up to CPG brands, consumer packaged good brands, who practice direct or fair trade sourcing strategies, like GIIN that Jaime had mentioned earlier. So given the breadth of our mission and focus across the food supply chain, all of the categories that are listed on the Sustainable Ag framework are relevant to our work, and many of our borrowers hit more than one of these verticals. You can head to the next slide. So Lotus Foods is an example that I'll walk through today. And so they're a consumer packaged good company that sources rice from smallholder farmers across Asia. They source from China, Indonesia, India, Thailand, and more. And they sell rice and rice-based products across natural food stores in the US. So they've been a borrower of ours for a while, and we've always found them to be really deep mission first borrower. And so using this framework, I just wanted to walk through how we would think about scoring them across some of the categories. So the three that stand out most for Lotus Foods are improving ecosystem health, promoting climate resiliency, and the social equity framework as well. So on the ecosystem health side, they have partnered with Cornell scientists to promote a new method of growing rice that's called the system of rice intensification, or as Lotus phrases it, more consumer-friendly phrasing, it's called more crop per drop. And essentially, instead of flooding fields to grow rice, this production method uses 20 to 50% less water, 80 to 90% fewer seeds. It also reduces the resilience on chemical fertilizers, and it increases farmer yields. So this production method has many ecosystem health benefits, and Lotus Foods helps smallholder farmers adopt these practices. And so they're helping promote this method of growing throughout their supply chain and providing this market for farmers, because they're promising to buy the products that they grow. So another element is the climate resiliency element of their work. So SRI, the system of rice intensification, was highlighted as a strategy in Paul Hawkins' book, Drawdown, that lists the top 100 strategies to reverse global warming. Flooded rice paddies produce up to 20% of man-made methane. And so using this new growing method really helps reduce methane production, about up to 40%. So that is a huge benefit for climate in the long run, obviously. Additionally, there's a lot of social equity alignment in Lotus Foods' work. They work with some of the lowest income farmers to adopt these methods, and they pay them fairly for it. So more of the food dollar goes to smallholder farmers. They have increased the income over 5,000 farm households that they work with, and they've also improved farmer working conditions. It's more sanitary for farmers, mostly women, to work in non-flooded fields. Like not working in standing water has enormous sanitation benefits. And they also really work with farmers and sourcing companies that practice fair trade practices, and they even have Fair for Life certification for some of their farmers, which is one of the highest integrity supply chain or fair trade standards in the industry. So just wanted to walk through that as an example of how we would then be able to think more clearly about their impact model when we use our impact assessment internally. Having these different categories will really allow us to break down the sections of our impact assessment more clearly and show the companies how they score across different issue areas within food systems. It's been challenging for us because of the breadth of our focus areas to do this work previously, and so having this crowdsourced deck of information will be, I think, really helpful and inform our impact decisions in our credit committees. And I'll stop here and hand it over to Evi.
Thanks so much, Meredith. Hi guys, we can go to the next slide, please. I'm Evi. I am on the investment team at Astanor Ventures. Astanor is an impact VC investing in food, agriculture, and blue ocean. We invest in early and growth stage businesses in Europe and North America. And before getting into Iris Plus, I just wanted to briefly talk through how we manage impact today. So we fundamentally and deeply believe that the world is moving towards sustainability and that financial return and impact return are indelibly linked. And so we assess impact at every stage of our process, from sourcing to due diligence to investment decision to portfolio management and finally to exit. And I'll focus on what we do post-investment because I think that's the sort of meatiest area. After we have invested, we start by working with our portfolio company to assess ESG. So that would be the sort of internal looking management practices around diversity and pay parity and governance and all the things that really help an organization run well and be oriented towards the future. And we would sort of assess a baseline and then over the course of our investment, help our companies improve in those ESG practices. And then the second thing we do is set impact KPIs with our portfolio companies, which we and the team believe are the most representative and important of their impact on the external world. So these would be quantifiable metrics like greenhouse gas emissions avoided on the environmental side, or increased pay returned to growers on the social side. And we set those initially with a 3-year target and continue to develop them and adjust them over time. And to ensure that we as an investment team are fully aligned on impact as well, we tie our own compensation to both financial return and impact return. So that means practically that if, for example, the fund were to perform very well financially, but we weren't to hit our impact KPIs, a portion of our carry would be donated to NGOs or charities rather than being returned to the investment team to reflect that outcome. So that's where we are today. And then maybe moving to the next slide, please. We put together a fun table mapping our existing impact categories to the 5 themes that Iris Plus raises. And as you can see, there's a really good overlap, and we were really excited to see how closely aligned we are. And then what we did was we took a portfolio company for each theme and walked it through which impact categories we think fit to that company along with the Iris Plus theme. And then looking at the proposed Iris Plus KPIs, which KPIs could be most relevant. And so when I think practically about what Iris Plus means to us as we try to further our impact journey, I think first and foremost, it really provides an even deeper and richer library of potential KPIs and forces us to think even harder about what the exact KPI should be for each company. So that's extremely helpful. Second, in areas where we might be less advanced in our thinking, it provides this sort of, it accelerates that learning and pushes us forward, and then we can go from there and continue to learn. So that's really helpful as well. I think it also provides some level setting for us, because as we think more about the absolute amounts that are associated with these KPIs, we can assess whether we're being aggressive enough in the actual numerical targets that we're setting and whether those are truly meaningful impacts. And then I think finally, and most importantly, it's really exciting for us to be moving towards a set of KPIs that are not just our internal ones, but that are shared with other investors and businesses, because that allows us to have a much richer conversation, to compare like for like, and to really be as rigorous as possible and as collaborative as possible in this space. So as a firm that's trying to be as honest and as rigorous about impact. Very excited about what IRIS Plus can do in our own assessments. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk through some of the examples, but I just wanted to speak practically about how we measure impact and how IRIS Plus fits into that.
Great, thank you. Jamie, go ahead, sorry.
No, I think I was going to say sort of a similar. Thank you, Evi and Meredith. That was, I think, really enlightening. I think we will open it up to questions now. And so please feel free to put your questions in the question box, and we will do our best to answer them.
I have one coming in, if I can throw it out there. So there's a question coming in about how people should be using these strategic goals, since they do interrelate quite a bit. And you touched a bit on this, Jamie, but I wonder if you could just gloss over that point as well again.
Sure. I think investors can use these goals as context and learning to understand the issues around sustainable agriculture. And I think the metrics are a good starting point to start thinking about what kind of impact can be measured through investments in sustainable agriculture. And I can go through some more specific examples if that's helpful. I don't know if Christi or the rest of my team wants to chime in. Or if Meredith or Evi wants to also chime in too, feel free to unmute.
And perhaps if not, I can throw out the next question that's come in. So there's another one coming in about how this information can be presented to food retailers so that they avoid buying from certain producers.
That's a good question. I don't know, David, were you gonna? Go ahead.
Well, David, you're still on mute. I think one part of this is, that this set of metrics is targeted towards investors. So you might think about the food retailers, if there are investors to them, how to get them to engage using these sorts of metrics, learn about where they are and encourage those, have the investors or other stakeholders encourage them to measure up, if you will, across environmental and social and health indicators. Now, David, if you wanted to add something. If you found the
I think
button.
I'm audible now.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there are other metrics and frameworks that are more tailored to other industry sectors like retail that might be more appropriate for them to track. But I think that especially for the financial piece of the food system, to begin to ask those questions of the retailers, of the farmers, and today the data or the ability to even collect that data might not be available, but just starting to ask these questions that I think that was part of the intent of engaging in this dialogue with GIIN, with the goals and the theme, was that some of these things we know are kind of not commonly talked about, but we think that they're important issues as we look at the food system as a whole.
Thank you. And kind of a similar question coming in, and I love that part of the underlying theme here seems to be how else can we use this content to drive towards impact? And IRIS Plus is targeted, of course, towards investors, but there really are a diversity of folks using it and in different ways. So on that point, another question coming in is around, similar to the question regarding food retailers, how could this information be used to educate consumers, either directly through public education campaigns or via advocacy organizations that deliver info to consumers?
I can chime in. This is Meredith. Just to say that I feel like a lot of these impact areas fall into labels that consumer packaged good companies put on their products. So it's not as comprehensive maybe, and it doesn't get into the nitty gritty that these do. But for example, like the fair trade certifications include some of these metrics. Organic certification, regenerative organic certification can sometimes tap into some of the ecosystem health aspects to this work. Some other companies are adopt a B Corp certification or a certification around net neutral carbon emissions. So there's a couple different ways I think that consumers are delivering that information. Companies are delivering that information to consumers, but you can only fit so many labels on a product. So it is a challenging topic to address holistically.
And some brands are doing it on their own, especially as it relates to carbon and climate, where we're seeing in the agricultural supply chain where there's marketing claims that are being used around, either the production practices and or what that brand is doing to mitigate any kind of climate exposure that they have as a brand. So whether it's purchasing offsets from other places in the market or doing everything that they can to reduce their climate footprint from kind of within the operations of the brand. And those are sometimes brands are putting that right front and center for, as related to their marketing materials.
Thank you. And another question coming in for Evi and Meredith. How would you suggest continuing to foster alignment between food companies and institutional investors, particularly those groups for whom there remains a significant disconnect around expectations for sustainable ag?
Crickets, sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yes. So the question is around fostering alignment between food companies and institutional investors, and just kind of understanding that sometimes those two groups, the companies themselves and institutional investors, may have different expectations for what sustainable agriculture looks like and how it should show up. So curious about how you have kind of fostered that flow of information and bringing people along in the process.
Yeah, I can start. Just I think for us, when we first start initial conversations with borrowers, we want to understand their commitments to sustainable agriculture or other impact areas within our work. And I think we see it as a journey. And so we ask questions and hope that during the relationship that they have with us, they'll deepen their work or they'll teach us things. So it is like we think about it. We say that it's a strong value for them to access our capital, and we hope that while they're working with us, they are moving on a journey to deepen their impact.
I would just add to that, we try to be really upfront about it. I mean, this is why we're in this business, and oftentimes it's why the companies that we're investing in are in this business. So for us, it is usually pretty natural, and we try to be very upfront about our impact measurement process in particular, and that it's going to become a quantitative process that we go through together with the company, and we're there to support them in that. And I guess the other way, part of the question is about bridging the gap between what one party might think is sustainable agriculture and what another party might. And I think that's where something like IRIS Plus is really useful, because it gives a sort of agreed upon set of metrics. And I think also focusing on the quantitative can really clarify things. So for example, we encourage a lot of our companies to go through an LCA process, so they can not just say, we're a sustainable business, but actually here's the external analysis that demonstrated that we are, and here's the numerical outcomes of that. So trying to really base it in fact and in data, and being upfront about that is probably our main strategy.
Thank you. We have so many questions coming in that we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So let me throw two more out. I'm going to throw them out at the same time. Folks can jump in and answer whichever one of them you are most drawn to, and we'll then shift to the final wrap up. So first question is, the metrics appear to be very aligned, but but they seem to be a kind of a proxy for customized metrics for a transaction compared to a standard or a common measurement that can go across an entire sector. Kind of, you use all of the same metrics for all of the same interactions, investments. Is that correct? So that's question one. And question two, the UN Food Summit and Pre-Summit are coming up. Any expectations or things you're looking for?
I can respond to question one, if that's okay.
Okay.
Cool. And so our experience, and I'd be curious if anyone else has different thoughts, because we would love to advance. But our experience is that we do need specialized and tailored KPIs for our companies, because even the ag space, though it might seem broad from or narrow from the outside, is actually so broad, and companies are operating in different parts of the supply chain. And so we do find that we need individual metrics that are most core to a company. Also, because we don't want to have a company collecting so many metrics that it's distracting them from their business. But the place where we do see standardization is on the ESG side. So that's where across our companies we measure the same information around diversity, around pay parity, around governance, and that we think should be for our companies in the stages where they are. Those metrics can be applied universally and compared more directly. But for the external impact, we still find that tailoring is necessary.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there. I know that the approach that we used with Navigating Impact Project is really to set up a starter set of metrics. And so across these 5 goals within investing in sustainable agriculture, it may be that you have more than one of those goals. And as Jaime showed, we had a mix of how those top core metrics even overlapped within those 5 goals. So we do think that the investor themselves has to ask themselves, why are they investing in this? What is their goal? What do they hope to measure over time? And yeah, it may be that the metric itself doesn't fit perfectly, but ideally through the IRIS Plus system, different investors are asking their investees the same sorts of questions, and clients are asking, getting the same sort of data, so it's comparable. So absolutely, I would say that there's a level of customization, as well as the fact that what we shared on the screen is only a fraction of what all the metrics that we really identified. If you want to dig in on the website, the Navigating Impact website, and see there's some core metrics and there's additional metrics, and even those we had to narrow down, because there's a lot of different ways our stakeholders that we engage with in this process think about the different values or impacts that are coming out of their investments, and what they hope to see happen in terms of positive impact. And so you're always going to have to customize to some extent for yourself.
Thank you. And just keeping an eye on time, I think we'll have to skip question 2, although it's a really good one. And panelists, if anybody would like to chat and answer to that one, please feel free. Kellen, can we scooch along to the next slide very quickly? Jaime, do you want to jump in on Croton?
Sure. So you can learn more about our work on our website, CROTONInstitute.org. You can also find the soil wealth paper and more work of our food and ag related work at soilwealth.org. We are also on Twitter at Croton and also at ORS, the ORS project that Christi had referred to earlier. And these are all these links can also be found on our website, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn.
Thank you. And on the GIIN side, lots and lots of guidance and resources and support related to GIIN and to IRIS Plus. We have regular demos, webinars, including a couple on agriculture and new guidance coming out. So links will be here, and we'll put this up on the website afterwards so that you can find all of these links. We do have a number of new themes coming into play. So we are here for the sustainable agriculture piece. We're also starting to work on racial equity, clean energy, biodiversity are the next 3 that we'll kick off. The GIIN has an active membership of about 350 organizations globally that are actively digging in on some of these conversations. And then we're also working, and Kellen, if we can switch to the next slide, on this suite of reports and analyses around impact performance. So in the vision of a world where investors can really actively and as they see fit integrate impact into investment decisions. We're launching an open call for impact data around agriculture, along with a couple of other spaces, including financial inclusion, jobs, energy, and various other pieces. If you're interested as an investor in submitting your data, there's a link here. You can also reach out to our colleague, Sophia Sunderji, with any questions. And we can move forward to the last slide and just thank you all for joining us. We look forward to being in conversation with you for as we move forward.